So, thank you all. One of the reasons I wanted to do this particular clinic is that and it may be because I have very limited space in which to model. I've kind of increasingly enjoy making dioramas, and quite frankly, you can consider a prototype model for the master builder requirement to be a diorama which potentially you could incorporate into a layout if you build sectionally or if you just chop out a hole. But let me show you here. This is the one I made. It's called the Woodsboro, Maryland depot, dated back to 1904, which was a date selected based on archival photos I was able to obtain. And in this case, I worked from more than one photo to piece together this whole scene. Others who may do a more contemporary thing or back in an era where they're is recent enough to have a whole photo of an area will find it easier. But the master builder prototype model is probably one of the least done AP certificates. In our division, only 4 members have achieved the AP prototype model. Andrew Dodge got it for this particular model he did, which is a Boreas Pass engine house with this very unique stone engine house that he built. John Paganoni, this prototype Damaraz has since been dismantled, but this is part of his Central Vermont Railroad history and affection for Montville Station. And of course, our friend Bernard Kempinski has received it for this lovely model of the bridge over Potomac Creek with the title "Don't Jump" because of the guy standing out there on the diving board, if you will, looking very serious. You can see him there on the right of the upper photo and in the prototype photo down below. And so what happened was one of my sons bought that house up in Woodsboro, Maryland, that you can see in the upper right. And immediately I noticed less than 100 yards away was the Woodsboro Depot, which has been restored by the Woodsboro Historical Society that uses it as its headquarters. And since it was just on the other side of that big building you see next to my son's house, I wandered over there and said, this is really nice, and I'll make a model of this for my son. And then this is the scene around it. There's the station. The tracks that you see are not in use, but down there where they sort of run off into the trees is the start or the end of the Maryland Midland Railroad. There's a quarry there, which is their end destination. And this is looking on the street that comes into the area. The depot's there on the left. The so-called old mill building, the red building, is there on the left. And down on the right is NZ Kramer and Son, which started off as a warehouse and hardware store and is now still a hardware store, and it extends now far to the back towards the quarry in Maryland Midland. And there's a look at it now, and you can see some of how it stretches off in the back. Now, originally, both the mill and Kramer's were serviced by a siding, and there used to be 2 mainline tracks that ran in front of the depot. This is inside Woodsboro Depot, where they've put all sorts of Woodsboro historic memorabilia. That's my son on the left, who lives down the street. And this was on an occasion where the late Jerry Scheme of South Mountain had built an O-scale replica of the Woodsboro Depot, which is on the table there, and my smaller version is in front of it, done in HO scale. So here's one of the archival photos that I worked with. The depot, there's that old house there, which I'll fill you in on later. It no longer exists. There's Kramer's, back when it was a warehouse, and you can see the railroad track there and the car. And down below, the Glade Valley Mill, also known as the Old Mill. And that's the way it originally looked. The earlier photo that you saw of a building that was clad in red is they built up and covered over this building atrociously, in my opinion. And you can see the old Pennsylvania Railroad Union Line car there in the picture. And here we go back to looking at the Woodsboro. This was a dated photograph that was in the station's files. And two others, these are also important to the build. Up in the top, you have an RPO of the Frederick and Pennsylvania line, basically Pennsylvania Railroad. And they're loading fish cans onto the RPO. These are the large, wider looking sort of milk cans. Woodsboro, or better said, Thurmont, back in the early 1900s, was the center for goldfish exporting in the United States. And the reason for that was they had ponds with farms, and the mineral content of the water gave the goldfish a particular hue that was highly coveted amongst those who wish to keep goldfish. And these cans, what they would do is the upper element, they would put some ice in it so that it would slowly melt and drip down and help oxygenate the water. This business thrived for a couple decades until farmers in the South realized they could have a longer growing season and raise more fish than the folks in Maryland. And then the advent of the plastic bag and shipping goldfish in plastic bags sort of put these milk cans out of business. And here in the bottom photo, you can see the milk cans or the fish cans standing on the platform. So this is a Sanborn map, which for those who are working on the prototype model or layouts in general, often find use for these Sanborn maps. Now, the earliest Sanborn map of Woodsboro, which is not a particularly large place, was from 1922. But what's useful is you can see the two mainline tracks and the siding that went by the mill and NZ Kramer's. And you can see the depot, but the old house that's behind it isn't there. So that's why I did this second slide here with the red star showing where that old house is. So sometime between 1904 and 1922, that house was torn down. Now, one of the requirements for a prototype model is you got to have an engine and rolling stock. And this is an early photograph of one of the 440s of the Frederick and Pennsylvania Railroad. So what I ended up building was this 2x3 foot diorama that replicated the main lines and the siding. And I left in the old house that was behind the depot. And I built the old mill the way it originally looked, and not the modern version with the horrible red cladding on the outside. And here's some additional views. Now, because you can view this from all sides, I just made a single sheet of sky blue paper with some airbrushed cloud formations on it so I can move it around for photographing purposes. So if you consider doing the prototype model, the NMRA requires four different types of models: rolling stock, railroad structure, a caboose or passenger car, and motive power. Now, passenger car can be, at least I was told by our AP coordinator, it can be a combine, it can be an RPO. Um, the other requirement is any two of these six models has to be scratch built, um, which kind of takes that, if you don't like scratch building, off the table. And the remainder must be super detailed. So in my particular diorama, there were six structures, four of which were scratch built, including the station. I also made the mill, the hardware store, warehouse, and one of the houses. I used a 440 locomotive, an RPO, and two freight cars. There are trees and bushes, dirt and paths, and I put in some lighting. And as I said, the backdrop's designed to be mobile for photo purposes. And so I was lucky that I found archival photos. So now I'll give you a breakdown here on what I did. This is the depot itself, which I scratch built. The Woodsboro Historical Society actually had a floor plan blueprint of the station, and it was two-thirds. The left two-thirds sections were a passenger area, and the right third was their freight area. And there's a freight double door at the right-hand end. They've restored the inside of the passenger area. They were working on the freight end of it, which has now been used for storage. The lighting I put in included that little lantern that was on a post that showed up in the archival photos. The signs replicate those that were in the archival photos. And then I put lights inside the passenger area as well as the freight area. NZ Kramer's. I really like this building, which is really across the street from my son's house. So when I visit, I see it a lot. And the front of it has changed. They've gotten rid of the overhang and the porch. It's now all glassed in. But basically, it's the same structure. There's no longer a loading dock on the side. But one of my favorite aspects, and you'll notice it in the upper portion where the roof joint comes together, is the old birdhouse, which I enjoyed replicating. But I made this particular model out of styrene with Tichy windows and doors. I used some sculpt-to-mold to cast some of the floor footings to support the building. And there's that birdhouse, which was, I think, crucial to building the structure, and a lot of fun. The Glade Valley Mill, or the old mill, you can see how it looked down at the bottom right. This is, again, another styrene structure with Tichy windows. The chimney I carved out of a hunk of styrofoam and carved the brickwork into it, and then painted it, weathered it. And there you can see the layout of the building supports. Now, the other structures in it, the house behind the depot, the one that disappeared in 1922, I scratch built that. It was rather simple. the house that's across the street from this depot is an American model builder's kit. And it's extraordinary that the house that exists there today sort of resembles this. If you go back to the previous slide, where's the bill here? If you look in the old mill picture in the bottom right, over the back freight car, you can just see the roof of a building. So I had to kind of guess as to what the building would be. So this is the bottom shed behind the milling company, which is a JL Innovative Design Kit. The freight cars that I developed for this were Westerfield kits, and they were my first resin builds, which I found rather challenging to start with. But they're really nice models to work with. One, as you can see, is a XG box car, and the other is a vegetable car. And this required, of course, the usual underbody work with running wires and bending wires and putting in the brake lines and so on. It was a lot of fun. We're just having another blast of torrential rain coming in. Sorry. I decided to make an RPO after getting clearance from Matt Thompson to do that in lieu of the passenger car. And I got an old LaBelle kit, which I had to make some alterations to by filling in windows to replicate the ones in the RPO that was visible in the archival photo. And here you can see the various components. If you've never done a LaBelle kit, they are another challenge, particularly shaping the roof. And I decided I was going to put in the RPO interior, which I was able to get from a place called Gold Rush Bay. And I had to cut it into various components to get it inside. And then I was able to get some additional details like the window bars and the mail snagger device from American scale models. And I put those Katie sort of prototype size couplers on it as I did on the two freight cars. I was able to locate a Ken Kidder brass 440 online, and it replicates the Pennsylvania class D10 440 that was used. And I had input from a historian in York, Pennsylvania, that was used on the route from Pennsylvania to Frederick via Woodsboro. And I had very little to do with this engine to make it up to snuff, other than I had to change the lettering on it and make Pennsylvania go on there, because originally it was a New York Central locomotive. So here's where I began assembling the actual base for this. I had a piece of 1/2-inch plywood, and I put 1-inch foam insulation on top of it. And I built up part of it to replicate the hill that exists in the topography of that area. And then I placed the buildings in to make sure everything would fit properly and in space. And I marked out the roadway and saw places where I had to build up the terrain with little clumps of leftover foam insulation. This is a view from another angle. So I ended up taking a whole bunch of Woodland Scenics foliage materials, plus some small branches and things that I found in my yard that I've been collecting for various reasons, whether to make lumber loads for my engines or for trees and shrubs. As I always do, I then take some additional spray paints to give some color variation to the foliage. And more recently, I added some small pre-made woodland scenics trees to the layout. I believe you see them in the bottom left photo. The roads and paths, again, some scenic products I got from Woodland Scenics, plus some sand that I keep out in my shed, which I think dates back hundreds of years. I don't know why I still have it. I guess there must be some left. And then a lot of fun adding a lot of details in various places. You can see the fish cans that I have. They're actually milk cans. Some pallets and some other stuff that you would associate with shipping. And up in front of the hardware store, some crates of things being unloaded, and down between the old mill and the outbuilding, some junk. And on the back of the backdrop, I added these replicas of these archival photos so that when I took it up to the station after I completed the diorama, I could display it and also point out the original archival photos with it so that people could relate to the display. And here are a few close-up scenes after I populated it with some figures. By leaving the door off on the RPO, I was able to position a guy inside who you can see in the upper left-hand photo, leaning out and looking to the guys with the mail carriage, which the wagon. Here you can see the activity in front of Kramer and Sons, and also a horse and buggy that I parked out there between the tracks over by the old mill in the upper left-hand photo. The lighting. Now, originally, I put lighting using Evans Designs coin cell batteries, which I hid in the bushes behind those three structures with a little push button in the bushes, and the mechanism was all underneath the buildings. I wasn't really happy with that in the long run, so several months ago, I decided to rewire it after consulting with Evans Designs and using a little equipment I got from them. I've now wired it for direct wall current with a single on-off button. And the lights are flickering. And so now I can just walk up to it and press the button, turn on the lights, and they all go on. And then this is, I call this last look before departing Woodsboro. Now, last year we had our semi-successful square foot diorama contest. And I was just toying with the idea of, what would it take to get the 6 required items onto a 1 square foot thing? Could I, squeeze an engine in here and another freight car or something, a caboose maybe? Would the loading dock count as a railroad structure? I don't know. It's probably not enough room, but you can get a lot done in a square foot if you really work at it. But I suspect you'd need more room for a real prototype model. So my advice, find a scene you like Jack has found one up in New Hampshire. I think obviously it'd be a lot easier to find a current scene than trying to model way back like mine. If possible, find one of those Sanborn insurance maps. And remember the basic requirements of what you have to do. Rolling stock, railroad structure, caboose or passenger car, motive power. And 2 of those 6 models must be scratch built. And another thing, consider how you might use, as I did, the rolling stock for your car's AP or your structures AP if you haven't already got them. I got a lot of help on this from the Woodsboro Historical Society. I mentioned the guy up in York who was a big help to me. That's Ivan France. The other guy, Rick Eiler, is a guy from the Historical Society, and he also happens to be a railroad engineer for real. And my son, who lives up there in Woodsboro. So that's my story, and I don't like to prolong these things, but that gives us more room to chat. So please let me stop sharing and or maybe not. So I'm ready to take your questions if you have any.
Very nice.
Alex, did you need to fastidiously position details such as the wagons, the horses, various people, miniature figures to match the photographs?
Well, I mean, I didn't throw them down helter-skelter. I replicated what I thought would be natural for the time and place. Like you saw in the picture of NZ Kramer's, there was a wagon drawn up um, actually towards the track side. So I moved around front so it could be plausibly loading stuff onto the wagon. Um, there was activity in between the tracks. That's why I positioned another wagon there. And the activities around the station, I thought were all logical. And there's no direct correlation between the archival photographs and specific placement of figures.
Mhm. Did you use more than one photograph to
Yeah,
demonstrate?
yeah. I mean, there was one of the station, one of the mill,
Mhm.
one of Kramer's, one of the RPO, one of the engine. Um, and they were all part of the collection of the Historical Society. Um, so it was allowed, it was accepted.
Mhm.
So, Alex, if you're using photos that cover a not necessarily wide range, but a somewhat limited range of time, um, how critical is it if some of the structures or some of the rail equipment matches one photo and some of it matches the other photo? But they might be like maybe 10, 15 years apart between the photos.
I don't think that should, I mean, I certainly, as an evaluator, would not hold that against you. Um, and I mean, I sort of lean down in I try and be historically accurate, but I would not be that nitpicky to worry about it. The photographs here that I used here probably spanned uh, about a 10-year era or a window. Uh, um, and I keyed off the one that I knew for sure was 1904 of the depot.
Okay.
I don't know if that helps with what you
It,
might.
it does. I have photos in mind of the area that I'm planning to do. Um, Unfortunately, most of the photos are ones that I have found on the internet. And while I can kind of date them based on the equipment, I don't have specific dates.
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I mean, obviously it's a lot easier. And I think the NMRA magazine um, did a section as part of Cynthia's pathway to master model railroader. She did one
Uh-huh.
on model prototype models. And I think if you go back at that, you'll see that, I mean, I think a lot of people use a single photo, like
Mhm.
here's a picture of the uh, industrial area at this rail yard um, from 1938. Bingo. And
Yeah,
that's
I
what they
wish
built.
I wish I had an overall photo. Mine, I have a couple photos facing in one direction across the tracks and a couple photos facing the other direction across the tracks. And
Mhm.
they're not necessarily exactly the same time period, but they're close enough that I think it's the same equipment involved, so
Yeah.
should be okay, I guess.
Yeah.
And for what it's worth, we live approximately 4 slides apart based on this rainstorm.
Yeah. I mean, it came down in a couple real hard bursts while I was talking.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just wind is blowing like crazy and the lights flickered once, but we're good now. Seems slightly calmer. Um, but they were
Alex, this is Kirk. Just to help orient myself, and I
sure.
dropped out for a little bit because my I had a 2 second power glitch which knocked out my
Oh,
router. I had to get back on, so I missed a few slides. But the building that's across the street there in the picture that's across the tracks from the depot, the white building, that's the big giant red brick building. Is it? I don't know if it's brick or not, but the one that's next door to your son's house. Is that
yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
Orient myself
Yeah.
properly.
They clad it with um, sh galvanized sheet metal
Oh, okay. It's
in a
not brick.
red.
Okay.
Let me go back. Yeah, that's
Ah, okay.
it's really ugly.
Yeah, I'm looking at it on Google Maps because I was just trying to orient myself, and I can see that now.
Yeah,
Hmm,
yeah, that's
Interesting.
most
Okay.
unfortunate. Actually, the guy that um, shall we say renovated the house my son lives in owns that building and has turned it into a woodworking shop where he does other kinds of projects. Uh,
Uh,
and he's
and
subletting parts of it for other people to use for other purposes.
and in this photo, the building that's jutting out on the left-hand side, that's the depot.
That's the depot. Yeah,
Okay. Thank you for helping me get
sure.
oriented.
There we go. There's another
Yep.
view.
Okay.
And you can see what's left of the track work um, in this case. There's actually remnants of the track or were visible to me when I walked around back over in this area to the side of the red brick building. Uh,
Okay.
Alex, the shed that's there now is not the one that was there in the older photos. Is that correct?
no, this is now this structure has been modified. This was a boiler house.
Uh-huh.
That's the one that I have the styrofoam. Yeah, this I made the out of foam insulation, the big chimney.
Hmm. Okay. And so the other one is gone now.
The other one is gone now.
Okay.
There is back here now. There's a lump back. What would be in the foreground of this photo on the left is a wired off lumber yard that is used by NZ Kramer
Mhm.
to store big supplies.
And also something you didn't touch on, and I don't know how many of the other attendees know, while these rails are technically unused, they do get used now and then when they move equipment in and out of Walkersville Southern.
That's correct. Yeah, many a time I've come up here and down here to the foreground where the tracks lead. You'll see like MOW equipment, um, that has come up from Walkersville. That's right. The other end of the tracks is Walkersville Southern Railroad, and the northern end, the far end, is the Maryland Midland Railroad. In fact, when I was up there a couple weekends ago, the train had pulled in with its gondolas, and it was taking on loads of quarry stone.
Well, the Walkersville Southern is probably the only reason these tracks are still here, or else they would have been pulled up.
Yeah, I think they may have given thought to expanding their run up to Woodsboro, but it never materialized. In fact, I don't know that the track goes actually all the way. Maybe the MOW stuff had to do with Maryland Midland as opposed to Walkersville.
Might have.
Now they do have gates down here at the end of the quarry and the Maryland Midland run, so they can close it off.
And where is your 2 by 3 foot sitting now?
It's down in my living room, actually, on a wooden. It was a Bavarian Kostentisch, or it's a table that comes apart so it can be moved. It's perfectly square. The top slides off completely, and the interior compartment that is accessed through the top is where you used to store plates and silverware and so on, if you were an old Bavarian farmer. And so I've got it sitting on top of that in the corner with the sky backdrop propped up against the wall behind it. It's a nice little fit. It's in a safe corner, and I have a plug down below that table. I can plug the lights in for it. And most evenings I'll go in there and turn on the lights and enjoy the view. Well, should I go back to any other slides here that anybody wants to see?
I know with something like this, after the scratch building, the quantity and quality of the details can make a lot of difference. How much do you think that adding the lighting played into it?
Well, if you get into that whole cockamamie NMRA achievement program scoring system.
Hey, now be nice.
I am, as much as I work with it now. There's some things that aren't particularly logical, like, you only get 15 points for scratch building, but you get 40 points for something else. It's sometimes it just, details, who knows? I think, if you're doing the very basics of a project with a view to getting an AP, I think you should do, as always, what you think, what pleases you, particularly when it comes to details and landscaping and so on. Is it, what do you think is missing from a particular scene that you're modeling? What would make you happy? Because I don't think it really weighs that much into it. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong. Does anybody else want to weigh in on that?
I know what you mean.
Like
And
here,
when did you add the grade crossings? I noticed them missing in this photo, and but they're present in some later photos. The wooden.
I haven't put any into this one at all. Is that something I missed? There are none.
I think some later photos, you have some wooden grade crossing in there.
Oh, across the track.
Your photos, yeah.
Yeah. Actually, where did I see it?
I think we lost Alex, Ernie.
Looks that way, doesn't it?
It does.
Let me see if I can get him on the phone here.
Well, I was particularly interested because this is the next one I'm working on. I've already gathering photos and ideas, and I have one structure already.
I see that. You're gonna come back?
Yeah, I'm trying to get back in now.
Okay, I'm watching for you. Thank you. Yeah, he got knocked off. Doggone mafia. Yeah, we'll give him a chance here. I'm sorry, Greg. Is it something I was talking to Alex and
No, just that this is particularly interesting. I know Jack's going to be doing this one next, and I'm going to be doing this one next.
well, I've got to debate whether to go back number 8 or not.
I'm looking at the categories right now, and under the prototype models, and the scoring, it does suggest 5 points for lighting. Illumination effects from 3 aspects: railroad cars, signals, buildings, streets, roads, overall lighting effects, day or night.
Huh.
So there's your answer. You can get 5 points right there.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
The
As
reason
they
I was
say-
asking about it, one of the buildings that my display is going to be built around is already built and on a base with a roof. So if I'm going to put lighting in it, I'm going to have to somehow drill through the base and feed something up, or else see if I can pry the roof off, whichever ends up doing less damage, I guess.
Come
Roger
up through the
that.
bottom.
Yeah, probably.
If you do it at the bottom, make a big enough hole, it won't be noticed unless somebody picks it up.
Yep.
There you go. Yeah, I don't know. Alex is going to try to get back on, but I'm suspicious either A, he lost his internet, or B, some other difficulty has popped in here.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, there's a lot of wind with that rain that came through.
You know, it's crazy. I'm down here in Manassas and I've got the sun shining and the clouds are flying through, but we seem to be on the south side of this stuff now, but the wind's
Yeah.
definitely cranking, and tomorrow's trash day. I'm trying to figure out how I gotta anchor my trash cans down tonight.
Are you sure
currently
they
in
didn't push
Manchester.
it back for President's Day?
They usually come regardless. The only time
Ah.
I've seen them miss is Christmas.
Okay. Ours has moved back a day.
So while we got to pause here for a moment, just a couple things division wise. Some of you are not division members, but the Potomac Division does have an upcoming event that I'm getting pretty excited about on May 17th. Our spring minicon is going to be back, and we've actually got a nice venue in McLean, Virginia at the Drainsville Community Center. That has, there's Alex. It looks like it's going to be pretty good for us. We just got the information up today, so it's up on the internet if you're interested. We've also got locked in on November 1st, the minicon we usually have out in Warrenton at the Battlefield Baptist Church. We've got the date now, and we're talking to James River about doing a joint thing, but we'll see how that pans out. We get a little bit further down the line. So we got those 2 events coming up. But the one in May 17th, I'm definitely excited about. We're going to try a little different format, I guess, something similar to what South Mountain has done several times up there. It seems to be successful for them. So anyhow, Alex, it's back to you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My power, there was a momentary glitch. The light stayed on, but it knocked my internet out. It took several minutes for that internet connection to be restored. I think the router had to recycle or something.
Alex, we were talking about lighting just before you got knocked out. the
Mhm.
lighting effects is worth 5 points on the scoring for the AP. So it's
Okay.
worth doing.
Yeah. Uh, Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't look at the point totals for it.
Mhm.
I kind of just did it, you know. Um, Again, I think that's important. I mean, obviously you have to pay attention to what the requirements are, but if you're fulfilling the basic requirements, um,
If in doubt, read the instructions.
definitely, and don't overthink them. Just you know,
Mhm.
that's
Keep
that
it simple.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm sorry that I had to be knocked out, and I just think it's a shame more people don't do this particular AP. Um, I think it's within everyone's reach that's already modeling. But then
Carolina Piedmont has had nobody earn that certificate yet.
I
Motive
don't,
Power
Wow.
and Prototype Models have zero achieved from
yeah,
our division.
that actually doesn't surprise me. I think in many respects it's probably very intimidating. Motive power is definitely intimidating.
Yeah.
And this is just like, well, I've got a layout. I don't necessarily have I may have replicated a prototype, but I didn't do that specific of a scene for it. Um, but you know, that's
That brings up a question. Could you take a part of your layout and use it as a prototypical scene versus just having a separate
yeah.
2x3 module kind of thing?
I
I
think
think it,
Sure.
I think Andrew Dodge's Boreas Pass was part of his original Colorado layout.
And wasn't Bernie's Bridge, wasn't that part of
Bernie's
it?
Bridge is
Yeah.
part of his layout that exists today.
Okay.
Um, I'm actually thinking I'm about to renovate the layout that's behind me, and I'm definitely thinking about one option would be to bring that diorama upstairs and build a layout off of it. Um, or I'm thinking about maybe instead of having a layout, having a multiple dioramas on display, because they allow me to work on um, things that I like to do. Um, I don't I don't have the space for uh, a Bill Mostellerian mega layout like he's got under construction. I've seen photographs of it. Thank you, Bill, and others. Particularly, I think somebody. Oh, I was in setting up this May 17th thing. I was engaging along with Ernie with various people and searching for clinicians. And one of the guys who has signed up to do a clinic on May 17th, Frank Beninati, um, is also working on another clinic on reducing his layout to a shelf layout for obviously retirement purposes, which is something I assume many of us will have to consider. And it's one of the things I'm taking into consideration with this is, you know, how am I going to break it down when the time comes for me to move along, or to parcel it out to um, maybe members of my family who might want to have a section of it. And for example, my son that lives up in Woodsboro, he's in the process of building a new home that'll be much larger than his little house now. And so I've thought about just giving the diorama to him, and alternatively giving it to the Woodsboro Historical Society, or giving it to my son and then let him eventually give it to this historical society if they want to display it. Um, so, um, you know, we all have to consider these things or be in complete denial and say it's not my problem, you know. At any
Okay.
rate, I think Ernie was talking to you about the May 17th thing. I think we're really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a nice event for many reasons. And also the formats that we're using are not always the traditional guy standing in front of the room with a screen doing a PowerPoint presentation. So it'd be a little something different for a change.
Hey, Alex, can you talk to them a little bit about that?
Well, when the meeting opens, we're going to start with this is an expansion of our idea of having a model display. We're going to have a table for people who want to bring in models and display. We're not going to have a popular contest vote. But we've invited 5 people to actually stand in front of those attending and give little 10-minute presentations about a particular model that they're going to discuss, they're going to show. I'll be bringing, for example, a water tower that I recently built, and it was a kit build, but I'm going to discuss it, and I'll have a few slides to show the various stages of construction. These will be little 10-minute segments. I know Greg is going to be there giving a structure. Ernie is going to be discussing a car he built, and Martin Breckbiel will be there discussing a trolley project he's been engaged in. And I think, let's see, the 5th person is Lee Stormer, who is going to be discussing his interlocking tower, as I recall.
Right.
So that'll be the first hour. And then we're going to have that we're calling it the Modeler Showcase. And everybody that wants to bring a model and show it off can still bring it up and display it on a table at the meet. The second session will be, again, something different. We're calling it Modelers Demonstrations. And we're going to set up 5 different tables. There'll be no one single presentation, but rather 5 modelers will be demonstrating particular techniques. And everybody that's attending can go from table to table at random. They can stay at one table if they want to dwell on what's happening there, or they can move on. One of the clinics will be about, let me see if I can call that up here. One of them will be, well, Greg is going to be doing a second one. He'll do something involving pan pastels and alcohol or something. Greg, do you want to describe that?
Yes, and they're used combined, not one used and one consumed.
Yeah.
I was at the micro layout meet in West Virginia last month, and one of the most recent MMRs, Randy Aleo, was showing how he uses pan pastels with alcohol to actually paint details. And he let me give it a try, and it was fascinating. And if any of us have used pan pastels for weathering cars or buildings, it's not that different, but it's different enough that it's its own unique little skill set. And I tried it on a bunch of details for a structure that I was building for our club, and they turned out great, and it was a lot of fun. And I think it's something that I want to show to more people and have them give it a try and maybe expound on it.
Thanks, Greg. So that'll be one of the tables. Greg will be doing that. Lee Stormer, who if you read the flyer, recently had an article, and then again, he replicated it for the local, for the MER, about using natural materials in his landscaping, like making root structures and so on coming out of a bank. So Lee is going to be displaying some of these natural landscaping materials, and you can look and see what he's got there. Pete LaGuardia is going to be discussing or showing track cleaning. And that actually links to an article that will be coming out in the first in a series on cleaning your layout, which is something we all deal with. Pete's going to demonstrate track cleaning. He has particular views on it. Others have other views. He also wants to add on a little bit about tortoise connectors and not having any tortoises, but knowing what they are. I'm not quite sure what the relevance of this is, but he's got a little gizmo that he attaches to the end of tortoises for wiring reasons. Nigel Phillips is going to have a little display and discussion about frog switches and templates for making track. And Frank Beninati is going to be discussing tree making using a wire armature. It's something he's been quite successful with. So that will be going on 5 of these different tables with people demonstrating these things simultaneously, and you can wander around, and hopefully each of these guys will prepare a little handout. We're going to try and get them from everyone in digital format before the meeting so that we can add them to the material that's available online, and people can download the stuff either before the meeting or afterwards if they want more information. Ernie's we're going to have lunch. It'll be pizza and hopefully a speaker if Ernie can get through to his contacts or make contacts. And then our final clinic, which will be after lunch, Brian Sharon's going to be doing one on 2 other aspects of layout cleaning, and that involves cleaning your rolling stock and the actual landscape on your layout. And those will be separate articles in 2 future issues of the flyer, cleaning rolling stock and cleaning landscape structures, landscape. So we think this will be, well, we hope that it'll have a good turnout and that everybody will enjoy this particular meet. And planning is already underway. Now that we know, courtesy of Jerry Stanley, our treasurer, that we have November 1st locked in for the use of the facilities of Battlefield Baptist Church down in Warrenton for that fall meet, which we hope the folks from James River and other divisions will join us. And we've already decided on a contest theme for our popular vote for that, and that'll be flat cars with loads, which dovetails with the November modeling theme that James River is having, and we figured why not add it for us at the same time, and that might be an attraction for them to come join us. And it'll also dovetail with one of the challenge themes that the flyer is having, is one of the future ones will be flat cars with loads. So, and if you haven't already done so, and I know you haven't, I'm still looking for people to send me a photograph and perhaps a brief description of a brass engine or any engine for that matter for the April-May issue of the Flyers Challenge. And yeah, Greg has got one in. That's great. Yeah, Ernie, back to you.